So what does the Super Bowl, the Eras Tour, and the Olympics all have in common? They're all crazy events happening, with a ton of chicks, where people have fun and let go a little. Drawing huge ass crowds of people to one packed area, occasionally you'll get someone doing crazy shit, or more accurately, someone eating crazy shit. But how did they get there? If you're Taylor Swift, you can just have a private jet chauffeur you everywhere. But if you're a regular person though, it might depend on where you live and where the event is. The location and the design of the area around the stadium influences the ways you get there. When Taylor came to Seattle for her Eras Tour, she broke the record for the number of people in attendance at the Lumen Field CenturyLink Quest Seahawks Stadium. People were scalping the fuck out of Swifties with their parking prices, so a lot of them came by transit, and like Seahawks, they flocked in droves by light rail and by foot. Public transit was necessary for making the event possible to attend. Train cars were packed to the gills with hundreds of people jammed in each train. There were many full-ass trains to get people in and out of there. Thousands of cars were easily taken off the road that day, with record levels of ridership of over 100,000, just enough to offset Taylor's carbon emissions that weekend. So how was this all possible? Services like the Link Light Rail were not always there. The One Line as we know it today started operation in only 2009. It took decades of failure to finally get rail transit in Seattle in the 21st century, and it all began 70 years ago. In the 50s, the United States was going through a major transformation. It was embroiled in the space race with the Soviet Union, all while continuing to lay the groundwork for mass suburbanization, with the passing of the Federal Highway Act and the GI Bill. During this time, the city of Seattle was planning for the World Fair, the Century 21 Exposition. It was a crazy event for Seattle to show people around the world the progress and modernity of the city. By 1962, the World Fair was held near the Queen Anne neighborhood in what we know as Seattle Center today. Voters in Seattle passed a Civic Center bond to fund the development of the World Fair by taking the street network of the fair site and combining it together to make the fairground. The ongoing space race between the US and the Soviet Union influenced the World Fair's futuristic space-age theme, and this drew attention from the US government to commit money to partially fund the fair. Major attractions that we know today, like Climate Pledge Arena, Pacific Science Center, and the Space Needle were all created for the World Fair. And let's not forget the iconic monorail. The monorail was supposed to be an example of a futuristic public transportation system. The track that was built shuttled visitors from Seattle's downtown over to Seattle Center, and as you will soon learn, will inspire rail transit projects in the future. The World Fair was a big success, and it put Seattle on the map. Fresh off the heels of the World Fair, the city was expected to experience a huge boom in growth. However, there were concerns on how the city would handle this growth. As mentioned before, the highway expansions and suburban sprawl were the primary ways of growth during this time, causing some concerns to the environment and quality of life. Civic activist James Ellis envisioned a more green growth, with a focus on public transportations as a means of getting around, with better access to open space, parks, and public waterfronts. From there, Ellis worked to jumpstart a campaign for Forward Thrust, to lead Seattle toward growth with public transit being at the center of the vision. Forward Thrust was a group of ballot initiatives brought forth to voters of Seattle and King County in 1968. These initiatives would fund various public projects that would put the city of Seattle in a position to grow as a proper city in a more thoughtful way. Projects like a multi-purpose stadium, rail transit, low-income housing, community centers, parks, and infrastructure upgrades were brought on the ballot to vote on. The initiatives would need a 60% supermajority vote to pass, and it would be funded through bonds. Initiatives like the Kingdome Stadium and arterial highways passed, but funding for rapid transit or low-income housing did not pass. God damn, this shit did not age well. The initiatives in Forward Thrust that did not pass were put up on the ballot again in 1970, where they all failed to pass, with transit getting the lowest approval. Yeah, Americans fucking hate rail transit actually. Just kidding. The 60% supermajority requirement for each ballot and the pessimism surrounding Seattle after the economic recession in the early 70s caused by the Boeing bust are probably more to blame. The federal government was also willing to chip in if the Rapid Transit Initiative passed, but because it didn't, the funds went over to Atlanta to build their MARTA metro system. After it was all said and done, this effectively shelved rail transit in Seattle for basically the rest of the 20th century. Or at least until the 90s. Legislation in Washington state passed in the early 90s that enabled counties to create a regional transit authority to operate and plan regional transit. Sound Transit was born out of this legislation after King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties came together to form a regional transit authority. Their first attempt to get regional rail failed as expected. The initial plan had transit lines going from Tacoma to Seattle, then north over to Mill Creek, and rail going to the east side from Seattle to Bellevue and Redmond. At least their second attempt passed. Sound Move led to the creation of light rail and commuter rail in the Puget Sound region. The plant had a light rail line going from the SeaTac Airport over to the University of Washington. In a poetically symbolic way, Seattle unalived the King Dome, which was built with the bonds from Forward Thrust before they were all paid off, and the Link Light Rail began construction later that year, starting with the Tacoma Link in 2000 and the One Line in 2003. The creation of Sound Transit and the passing of Sound Move led to another rail transit side quest. In 1997, the Seattle Monorail project began with the passing of Initiative 41, an initiative to expand the monorail system. This led to the creation of the Elevated Transportation Company, a public development authority created to manage the Seattle monorail expansion. The plan envisioned a monorail that would go from Ballard down over to West Seattle via downtown and Seattle Center. The project ran into financial issues and faced public scrutiny. It failed to actually get a monorail plan approved by voters, leading to the shutdown of the project. Around a year after the monorail project dissolved, the Link One Line began operation in 2009. Sound Transit has been trying to fill in the holes left from the failures of the original Seattle Metro and the monorail expansion by building out a light rail network throughout the region. The light rail we have now is seen very favorably. However, every rail project, past and present, faced public scrutiny from everyone, to NIMBYs, Luddites, ordinary citizens, and wealthy interests. So what can we learn from the past as an ordinary person? One thing is that voting on local issues matters. Funding for every one of these transit projects was presented to voters to decide on. Decisions made on mass transit are also influenced by local politicians, like your mayor and city council, and can make or break a project. Activism and participation in the civic process can also lead to change. James Ellis never held public office, but his work influenced how Seattle urbanized. From Forward Thrust to the freeway park lid over I-5 and starting the momentum for rapid transit that would lead to the light rail we have today. In addition to voter support, financial support is needed as well, particularly with funding and management. I think we've learned the hard way that passing bonds and tax levies and managing them properly is easy to fuck up. The original Metro never got funded, the monorail project went bust, and Sound Transit nearly lost their ass because of financial problems in the beginning. Timing for introducing rail projects can also be important. Big events like the World Fair put a flame under the ass of Seattle to build out their monorail line quickly, but economic events like the Boeing bust in the 70s helped foil the original Metro plan. Seattle's rail transit story parallels other American cities as well, like with MARTA in Atlanta back in the Forward Thrust days, and with Metro in Los Angeles, which is now expanding their transit in anticipation of the 2028 Olympics. So if your city is planning out transit expansion, let's get out there and make that shit happen.
Silver rain in the stars. say